The movie starts with a man who introduces himself with his alias, Lambert, hiring 4 male and 2 female criminals who do not know each other to kidnap a 12-year-old ballerina named Abigail. Abigail is the daughter of an extremely wealthy man whose name Lambert does not reveal. While 3 of the criminals enter the house, the other 3 are waiting outside the mansion, shutting down the home's cameras and manipulating access to the mansion's smart doors. As they're waiting in position ready to shoot, with their gateway car prepared, one of the female criminals who has entered the house learns that the target is a child and becomes reluctant to continue. When Abigail arrives home from ballet rehearsal, the trio waiting for her inside her bedroom sedate and blindfold her and put her inside a bag despite her attempts to fight back. A man whom the criminals think is her father arrives at the mansion with his men and calls out for Abigail, but they successfully evade them as well as their street cameras on their way to a secluded mansion. At said mansion, Lambert greets them and tells them that he is pleased with their work, especially since they all came highly recommended to him. After the kidnappers settle Abigail in a room, they set up a lookout position as Lambert ordered. Lambert then collects their phones to guarantee that they won't be tracked and orders them to keep their doors locked and Abigail isolated for 24 hours, during which they wait for the $50 million ransom from her father. Lambert reminds them that they're forbidden to reveal their real identities, which the criminal with glasses assumes is to prevent them from ratting out the others when they're caught. Lambert then assigns them aliases. The arrogant man with glasses is Frank, the younger male driver is Dean, the female hacker Dean likes is Sammy, the dim-witted older male driver is Peter, the reluctant female is Joey, and the male sniper is Rickles. To prevent Abigail from figuring out how many kidnappers there are, Lambert assigns Joey to be the only one to check on her. After Lambert leaves, the criminals head to the mansion's fully stocked bar for a drink. Joey declines Rickles' offer to drink and says that she might join them after she goes to check on Abigail. Dean starts to confidently guess everyone's backgrounds, but Joey calls him the least perceptive person she's ever met, saying he got nothing right. Because of this, Frank challenges her to correctly guess one thing about him in exchange for a $100 bill. Joey declines, but when Dean takes it as a confirmation that she knows nothing, Joey replies by saying Frank used to be a cop and immediately proceeds to take his money. As Joey seems to be sure of her guess, Sammy asks if Frank had arrested her in the past, which Joey denies, but she claims that his stance, walk, shoes, standard-issue Glock, and use of police hand signals back at Abigail's house gave him away. She adds that his intelligence and his need to be in control gave him away as a detective, and that she can tell he's trying to hide that he has only been living in the area for a few years while he's originally from Queens. Entertained, Peter pulls out a bill and enthusiastically asks her to guess his background too. As Joey takes his money, she says she almost feels bad taking it because it's so obvious that he's a muscle from Quebec who was once bullied, then turned into a bully himself and made it a career. With a disheartened look on his face, Peter gives her a fist bump, a quiet confirmation that she's right. Sammy excitedly pulls out $20 for Joey to guess her background as well, which Joey finds cheap considering she's rich. With this, Sammy's face lights up in excitement and she happily nods and confirms that she's right. Joey adds that Sammy's only there for the thrill, thinking her actions are not as bad since her weapon is a computer keyboard instead of a gun, and wishes her luck for when the illusion wears off. Impressed, Sammy confirms. When it's Rickles' turn, he tells Joey that he has no cash to offer, so she says she'll leave it with Semper Fi, which is the US Marine Corps' motto. Joey skips over Dean, but he insists that she has guessed his background too, prompting her to say that he's a good driver, albeit not a professional, and that he's a sociopath. Taking a turn, Frank guesses that Joey is a recovering drug addict, saying that a cop knows a junkie. He then points out her candy affection, long sleeves, and refusal to have a drink. Joey, wearing a mask, proceeds to check on Abigail, who's now awake and asking a lot of questions, pleading to be freed. She ultimately gives in to Abigail's request that her blindfold be removed and adjusts the way Abigail's arms are fastened with the cuffs to make her more comfortable. Joey starts to comfort a frightened Abigail and promises that she won't let anybody near her. When Abigail asks for her name and whether she has any kids, Joey responds that she can call her Joey and that she has a son of her age. Abigail then insinuates that her father will not pay the ransom because he doesn't care about her. Before Joey leaves, Abigail turns to her and says, "I'm sorry for what's about to happen to you." Joey returns to the bar and tells Frank that Abigail implied her father might be a particularly violent man. Frank dismisses her concern, saying it's just Abigail's strategy to rattle her because she's scared, but Joey disagrees as she feels something is up. Frank decides to enter Abigail's room and sees Abigail looking at him with no blindfold on. Startled, he points a gun at her, ordering her to look away. When he angrily demands that she reveal her father's identity, Abigail, frightened that there's a gun to her head, tearfully reveals that her father is Christophe Lazar. Having learned about Abigail's father's identity, Frank gives up his share of the ransom and on his way to leave reveals to the group that Abigail's father is Christophe Lazar, a very powerful man with an unfathomably huge empire that controls a lot more than crime. While Joey, Peter, and Rickles fear for their life, calling Lambert insane for targeting Lazar's daughter, Sammy, who has no idea who Lazar is, suggests returning Abigail and apologizing, which Frank considers stupid. When Dean says Lazar is an urban legend, Frank disagrees. Joey then suggests pulling out of the plan, leaving Abigail with food and making an anonymous phone call since Abigail doesn't know their faces. Frank, however, says Abigail saw his face thanks to her. Thinking about the fact that Lambert hired them because they can pull off the kidnapping and that $7 million per person is way too big of a sum to lose, they decide to go through with the plan and disappear after they receive their share. Assuming that any threats will come from the outside, Frank reminds everyone to stay alert. He continues to set a perimeter, assigns Rickles to take the first watch shift in their lookout position, which they call the Crow's Nest, and asks Joey to familiarize herself with the ins and outs of the mansion. While wandering around the mansion, Joey reaches the library, where she finds a huge statue of a cloaked man with a hat and a little girl. She then uncovers the round high window above it. Later, she bumps into Rickles, who tells her that he doesn't trust the others and makes her his ally. Meanwhile, Sammy watches a cartoon in one of the rooms, and Dean pranks her and tries to hit on her. After getting rejected, he wanders around the mansion, and upon seeing Peter sleeping, he pulls out a marker and draws on his face. He sees a painting of a white-haired girl and a cloaked man with a hat. As he reaches the basement kitchen, he gets attacked. Sammy hears Dean's desperate screams for help and rushes down to check on him. To her horror, she finds Dean's head falling off his body, prompting her to scream and vomit. Her screams in turn awaken Peter, who comes in to check on her and finds a headless Dean, as well as a frightened and disgusted Sammy, who questions why he has a drawing of a man's genitals on his face. She then orders Peter to call the others. Since Dean's corpse looks like a wild animal ripped him apart, Joey brings up Lazar's hitman Valdez, who is known for his brutal decapitations. While Frank refuses to entertain the terrifying idea, Rickles shares the story he heard about 3 of Lazar's top lieutenants getting arrested a few years prior, which resulted in a dozen FBI agents being found ripped apart with their organs missing on the top floor of a hotel the night before the trial. The group decides to check on Abigail and deduce that either Lambert ratted them out or that one of them is Valdez. The fact that Abigail is still in the room doesn't guarantee that Valdez is not there as well, so Rickles decides to quit. Unfortunately, when he opens the main door to leave, he discovers a locked gate that wasn't there before, and him and Peter fail to open it. Immediately, all access to the mansion gets sealed, and Joey realizes that they're caught in a trap. Rickles runs back to the Crow's Nest and discovers that his rifle is missing. After Frank suggests to Joey that Valdez might have left Abigail in the room to throw them off, Joey asks Abigail if someone other than her and Frank has checked on her, which Abigail denies. Abigail then tearfully confides to Joey that Frank threatened to hurt her if she revealed that he is Lazar's man, Valdez. After this, Rickles informs Joey that someone stole his rifle. In turn, Joey informs him that Abigail claimed Frank is Valdez, to which Rickles responds that it doesn't make sense since Frank wanted to leave in the first place. Rickles and Joey start to create an escape plan, but when Joey turns around to leave, Rickles gets attacked and dies a few seconds after. Joey proceeds to confront Frank in front of Sammy and Peter, but he denies her accusation. Pissed that Abigail is trying to pin him, Frank orders Peter to harm her. Joey follows Peter to Abigail's room and stops him from shooting her as she promised her that she'd protect her. As Frank, Peter, and Joey point their guns at each other, Abigail effortlessly removes her cuffs, prompting Sammy to scream out loud to alert the trio. Abigail transforms into a vampire and jumps onto Peter, but before she can bite him, Frank shoots her in the head and her blood splatters everywhere. To everyone's horror, Abigail quickly gets up and heals her own gunshot wound, prompting them to run out in fear and locking her in the room. Now realizing that Abigail is a centuries-old vampire and Valdez, the criminals try to come up with an escape plan, but Sammy has no equipment to hack the sealed doors and windows. When the clock hits 3:30 a.m., Frank, Peter, and Sammy use sharpened pool cues as stakes and garlic to try and attack Abigail, but she overpowers them. When they return, Joey, who didn't join them because she plans to trade Abigail to Lazar in exchange for their lives, treats their wounds and suggests they sedate her as it had been proven effective. As they go to look for Abigail, Sammy falls into a pool full of corpses. Meanwhile, Peter informs the others through their comms that Abigail is chasing him, prompting everyone to run to his location. During a struggle, Abigail bites Sammy, and Joey manages to sedate Abigail. They lock Abigail in an elevator, and when she wakes up, she reveals that she herself ordered Lambert to bring them to the mansion to avenge her father. She reveals that Sammy, whose real name is Jessica Herney, siphoned money from Lazar's accounts. Peter, whose real name is Terrence Lacroix, worked as a muscle for the Montreal Broussard family, which is a tiny subsidiary of Lazar's empire, and stole from them. Frank, who is former detective Adam Barrett, infiltrated their New York arm while undercover and arrested Lazar's 3 lieutenants. He was the man behind the story Rickles heard, and Abigail was the one who decapitated the FBI agents. Joey, who is army medic turned underground doctor for shady people Ana Lucia Cruz, was too high to perform a bullet removal on an important figure in Lazar's business, so she ended up accidentally killing him after she nicked an artery. Abigail also accuses Frank and Joey of abandoning their children, which angers Joey and prompts her to say that Lazar truly mustn't care about her, so she is trying to earn his love by eliminating his enemies. After everyone leaves to cater to a wound of Peter, Frank stays to watch Abigail, and she tries to convince him to release her by revealing there's a secret door in the library. Unsuccessful, she detaches the elevator door with one push. Before she can bite Frank, Joey arrives and destroys the wooden planks on a window, exposing Abigail to sunlight, which causes her arm to blow up. As Abigail's arm regrows, the group retreats to the library, where Frank learns that Abigail lied to him about the location of the secret door. As they look for a power source so that Sammy can unseal the mansion's access, Sammy, as a result of Abigail's earlier bite, transforms into Abigail's vampire servant and rips Peter apart. Under Abigail's control, Sammy lures in Frank and Joey, but they quickly retreat to the library, where Abigail, through Sammy, reveals that Lazar turned her into a vampire there. Joey reflects the sunlight from the round high window to Sammy using a metal tray, causing her to blow up. The secret door opens, and through it, they reach the security room, where Lambert is waiting for them in his vampire form. When Frank confronts him for setting them up, Lambert reveals that Abigail turned him into a vampire 2 years prior after finding out that he helped Frank in New York, and he's since been delivering Lazar's enemies to her. Lambert convinces Frank to turn him into a vampire so they can team up and kill both Abigail and Lazar, whom he has called and who is on his way. However, after he transforms, Frank pierces Lambert's heart for setting him up, killing him. When Abigail arrives, Frank bites her and drains her blood. Meanwhile, Joey unseals the mansion's access, retrieves her phone, and runs out. Unfortunately, she reaches a dead end, prompting her to leave her son Caleb a voicemail, telling him how much she loves him. A weak Abigail saves Joey from Frank and proposes teaming up to defeat him in exchange for her freedom. Although Frank overpowers them, he fails to turn Joey into his vampire servant because he is still inexperienced. Joey and Abigail eventually pierce Frank's heart, causing him to blow up, and Abigail assures Joey that she won't turn into a vampire because Frank is now dead. Before Joey leaves, Abigail encourages her to reunite with her son Caleb, but Lazar arrives and intimidates Joey. Abigail intervenes and informs him that Joey saved her life and that she was there when he was not. Because of this, Lazar lets Joey leave. And that's the end. Enjoy this recap, like this video, and subscribe for more crazy stories like this.